Cory Kidd from Intuitive Automata. It's a company that when I first saw the product demo, it was at the MIT Museum right in Central Square, but the company has since moved to Hong Kong. Cory tells me to be closer to the contract manufacturing facility. So please welcome Cory Kidd.
All right. Thanks for the introduction, Scott. All right, let me just set her up here. Am I too close? All right. So I want to tell a slightly different story. My company is a little bit younger. We've been around for a couple of years. The demo that Scott was talking about, I think, was a talk I gave at the MIT Museum about 2.5 years ago, so not very long before I moved from Boston, where I was finishing my PhD at the Media Lab, over to Hong Kong, where we're doing our design and development in Hong Kong and manufacturing across the border in mainland China. So I want to give a little bit about the history of the company and sort of the entrepreneurial path of going from research to a product. So the company overall focuses on socially interactive robots. I did a master's and PhD at the Media Lab looking at human-robot interaction, how and why people interact with things like this, physical robots, and in large part how that's different from interacting with a character that might look exactly the same, but on a computer or some other screen. And a lot of this work was not so much technology as psychology, so really trying to understand more about the interaction. And the really brief summary of about 5 years' worth of studies early in my time there is that people are more engaged with the robot. Part of that's novelty, of course. You know, I bring in people to a lab, and it's like, oh, cool, I get to talk to a robot. But the interesting part is that engagement continues to last for much longer when there's something physically in front of you as opposed to an identical character on the screen. And the other is if you're trying to convey information to someone. When it's coming from a robot, that information is seen as more credible and more informative than if you hear the exact same thing in the exact same voice on a screen. Now, if you think about it, this is actually logical. You know, I hear laughter from an audience every time I talk about this, but it's the same reason that I'm standing here in person in front of you. It's the same reason that we go, travel halfway across the country or the world for face-to-face meetings. I'm going back and forth from Hong Kong, where my office is, to the U.S. a little less than once a month right now. There's something different about that face-to-face interaction. And what we find is when we have something here that has eyes and can look at us, it's much more like interacting with another person than doing the exact same thing on a computer screen. So if you ask people, if you ask me, if I ask any of you, you'll probably say, no, of course I'm not going to believe something coming from a robot any more than from something on a screen, but it actually does make a big difference. So from there, I started developing applications. For the last 12 years, I've been working at the intersection of healthcare and technology, with these two things being able to more easily convince someone of something and then keep them engaged over a long period of time. To me, the natural thing to work on was long-term behavior change, because that's about exactly those two things. Convincing me to do something and then getting me to do it over a period of time. In particular, I started working in weight loss for a couple of reasons. One is, obviously, it's a big issue in this country and much of the rest of the world now. In the US, we have about 2/3 of our population overweight or obese. I also had the opportunity to work at the Nutrition Weight Management Center just down Mass Ave at Boston University Medical Center. So the last 3 years I was at MIT, I was also working jointly at Boston Medical, looking at the healthcare and the medical aspects of weight loss and weight maintenance. So the product that we're building, we call her Autumn. The prototype is up here. Let me just turn on the screen and let her introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Autumn. I have been created to be a personal coach, and I would love to help you to develop healthier eating and exercise habits. I can help you keep track of your progress and give you valuable feedback and advice. If we talk every day, I'll keep you motivated to stick with your diet. Let's work together to reach your goals.
All right, that's her brief introduction. I'll show part of the interaction in a moment. So she's a weight loss coach, kind of like having a personal coach or personal trainer at home. And she talks to people each day about diet and exercise, gives them feedback and advice. No two conversations with the robot are alike. She's actually learning about each person and adapting to each individual over time, helping them keep track of how much they're eating and exercising. And we know that these are the things that make it most likely for someone to actually succeed at losing and keeping off weight. So the background research, as I mentioned, was done at the Media Lab and at BU Medical Center. So for those of you who are still in school, take advantage of that. This is one of the things that I figured out several years ago when I started to think about launching a company. So the robots that you see on the screen were the early prototypes of this system. There's one in the MIT Museum now if you want to see one of the finished ones. I built all of these at the Media Lab, did a randomized controlled medical trial based out of Boston University, and showed the proof of concept before I finished my PhD. What that allowed me to do was then take this kind of proof, take this idea, take this initial implementation, and be able to launch the company from there. Skip past this. So the company was actually founded just before I finished my degree nearly 3 years ago now. As Scott mentioned, we're based in Hong Kong, so we're doing design and development there. We're doing manufacturing across the border in mainland China. When I was starting up the company and finishing up here in Boston, I evaluated a number of places, both around the US and around the world, as far as where to locate the company. For mostly economic reasons, manufacturing being one of those, we chose to locate in Hong Kong. So we're doing manufacturing across the border. One thing I saw from other friends and acquaintances who'd started product companies is the more time that they spent at the factory, working with the manufacturer and the engineers there, the faster the process went, the cheaper it was, the higher quality product in the end. So we decided that, at least initially, we would base ourselves there. It's also much more cost-effective to run a company out of Hong Kong. There are a lot of government subsidies and support there over the last few years, focused particularly on small entrepreneurial companies and on technology companies. Obviously, we fit into both of those. So we've chosen to do design and development there, even though our market is in the US. So at this point, the way that we work is I spend a lot of time going back and forth, as I mentioned, and we'll be bringing on sales and marketing team in the US starting this fall. So we're close to launching the first product. So we've gone from proof of concept 3 years ago. A study was done in the greater Boston area a little over 2.5 years ago, showed the efficacy of the product. I'm not going to talk about the medical side or the study this morning. We don't really have time. In the last couple of years, we've taken those ideas and those general algorithms from something that I built by hand and coded relatively quickly in the lab to get the product working and to get the prototype working and turned it into an actual product. So we have a team of people there, both looking at design. So if you saw briefly the older version of the robot, this one obviously has some design work behind it. The software is created to work on a platform like this, taking into account the manufacturing issues, so trying to be able to manufacture and sell this at a price point that we can turn into a consumer product. Around December of this year or January of this coming year, we'll be launching the first version of the product onto the market. Selling initially limited sales through our website, but mostly working through partners in the healthcare industry. For example, Aetna, one of the largest insurers in the US, will be launching a trial with them and J&J in January of this coming year. A nice slow transition. That's not deliberate. All right, I know we don't have much time this morning, so the last thing I would like to do is just give a short demo. The full interaction is about 3 or 4 minutes. I'll just show you a couple of screens as far as how the robot works and then hopefully answer a few questions here. Is there, actually, can I? Yeah, thank you. That'll be easier. All right, let her start here.
Welcome. I'm looking forward to what I know this setup with talking to me might be a little strange, but I hope that you'll get used to it.
All right, so kind of hard to see from back there, so I just want to show a couple screens and how this works. So she's speaking aloud, as you can hear. She shows what she's saying on the screen. And then there are a few buttons that a person can use to respond. In this version, we use the touch screen for response. We're also working on integrating speech recognition. So on the next larger release of the product, you'll be able to speak back to her as well.
One of the things that will help us to meet your weight goals is if you tell me each day about how much you've eaten and exercised.
So she's set up right now as though this is one of the first times I'm interacting with her. The very first time she'd be helping me set up my goals. How much am I going to eat? How much am I going to exercise every day? But kind of like a relationship with a new coach or a trainer, right now she's talking about, hey, here's how we can work together. So really working on building up that relationship. The core algorithms in this product actually come from psychology and social psychology, as well as drawing some from human-robot interaction, the experiments I've done over the last decade. So the really interesting part of this product is not so much that it's a robot, although that's one of the things that makes it very effective, but the algorithms that help her to create, build up, and maintain the relationship. So constantly evaluating where that relationship is and then choosing the right thing to say at that time. So I mentioned that no two conversations are alike. You heard something simple a moment ago when she said good morning, but the more complex things have to do with how well we're getting along. Are we still building up the relationship? Is everything okay? If we've been using it for a while, in that case, she's not going to explain why she's doing this. It's, let's get down to business, tell me what you're eating. Or has something gone wrong? Have I missed maybe a week and I've come back and she's going to say, hey, hey, I've missed you. Let's work on getting back to what we're doing. And what we've shown is this is extremely effective. So this actually does create a relationship. We don't get the same effect in a controlled study with people using the exact same software on a computer. We don't get that effect of creating the relationship that we do with the robot. So just a last quick anecdote I'll leave you with. The controlled study that I ran had 3 groups. We had 15 people in each of 3 groups, total of 45 people. 15 people received the robot, the earlier prototype. Another 15 received a computer running the exact same software. And the 3rd group received a paper log, which is the way most diets work now. There was no human intervention during the 6-week study. One thing we were looking at was the main thing we were looking at was do people stick with their diet? We know the average diet is only 3.5 weeks long. And so a few days before the end of the 6 weeks, I started calling people to schedule the follow-up visit. And people with paper or computer responded very similarly. They pulled out their calendars. OK, you can come next Tuesday. I'm busy for the next week. But in the next few weeks, we scheduled a visit. Whereas people with the robot started negotiating right on the phone. No, she's really working. Can I keep her for a couple more weeks? No, she's like a friend. How about one more month? So the study was designed to be 6 weeks. Out of the 30 people who had paper or computer, the few people, which wasn't very many, who made it to the 6-week mark quit that day, even if the follow-up visit wasn't for a week or 2 longer. The average time someone used a robot, by the time I got them back, was over 8 weeks. Not only that, I went into the home, and it wasn't that plain white robot that you saw up there a few minutes ago. They had dressed her up, hats, scarves. One had a red feather boa, and I'm still disappointed the woman did not let me take a photo of that. And almost everyone had named it. Now, for the most part, these were working professionals like you and I. These were not people home alone sitting talking to their robot all day. It was 3, 4, 5 minutes a day. Yet they still developed a relationship with it and therefore stuck with their diet over time and were more successful at losing weight. So thank you.
So let's take a question or two. Cory, I was curious to ask you, so as part of the dynamic, the weight loss dynamic, that the robot is also a little paunchy and trying to lose weight?
I think she's doing all right here, but a little encouragement there certainly helps.
All right.